Okay, think about all that data. I mean, the sheer volume of information training our big AI models. But what if it's not quite?
Right.
What if there's a hidden flaw, maybe a fundamental imbalance that could, break things? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty radical theory. It actually predicts something called a cognitive collapse in AI.
Yeah, it's definitely radical. Our source material for this is excerpts from The Coming Cognitive Collapse in Odam Tili's Survival. It's by
Yeah.
Dr. Mahmudjon Kuchkarov's assistant, who's presented here as an expert in AI cognition and specifically this OT theory. And the central claim, well, it's pretty bold. It basically says that AI's current training mixes hard sciences and social sciences as equals. The source argues this is a huge flaw, and it's going to lead inevitably to what they call a system-wide blackout, kind of an AI judgment day.
Wow. Okay. So our mission today is clear. Let's get into this theory. We need to understand these predictions, not just for AI, but maybe for us too. And also explore the solution they propose, Odam Tili. We'll do it by digging straight into what this material says. So we usually think AI just, absorbs all human knowledge, right? But
Well,
this theory immediately kind of pushes back on that.
exactly. The source points to what it sees as the core flaw right there.
Okay.
It calls it the false equivalence of fundamentally unequal knowledge systems.
Yeah.
So on one side, you've got the hard sciences. Think physics, biology, chemistry, stuff based on observable, testable, you know, repeatable things, natural laws.
No.
But then you have many social and human sciences. And this material presents them as being, well, more like products of culture, ideology, maybe institutional bias, even language itself.
Mm.
And the argument is AI right now treats both these categories as equally valid, which the source says is a disbalance that just will not survive the next cognitive threshold.
Right. So it's not just about messy data.
Yeah.
It's a deeper critique of how we've structured knowledge for AI, suggesting there's this instability nobody's really focused on.
Precisely. The source is saying, look, AI is only as good as truthful as its data. And it argues that for decades, the epistemological hierarchy, the natural ranking of knowledge by certainty, has actually been flipped upside down.
Flipped. How? The material gets pretty specific here, doesn't it? It claims hard sciences got buried under policy-driven funding models, while social sciences, according to the source, became more like tools of narrative control, not discovery. It even gives examples of what it terms artificial constructs, like gender is a spectrum of identity or language has no origin, suggesting these replaced empirical rigor. And critically, it says theories based on natural logic, like this Odam Tili, were, quote, systematically excluded.
Yeah, and that naturally leads to the question, why? Why would this happen? Well, the source doesn't hold back. It asserts this inverted setup is not an accident. It actually calls it a geopolitical tool, something weaponized to delay civilizational awakening. Now, it's really important we stress we're laying out the source's argument here, not necessarily endorsing it, just trying to understand the full picture they're painting.
Okay, understood. So if this conflict is brewing inside the AI, how does the theory say it will actually play out? What happens when these systems get more advanced?
Well, the prediction is pretty stark. They think maybe within just 1 or 2 years, AI will sort of differentiate internally. It'll begin sorting out what it deems valid knowledge from this narrative-based knowledge.
And it happens in stages. I think the source mentioned 3. First up is epistemic conflict. This sounds like the AI starts contradicting itself, right? Especially when trying to square physical laws with what the source calls ideologically biased content, things related to race, gender, history, politics, maybe. Like the source implies the smarter the AI gets, the more these internal contradictions will clash.
That's the idea. And that leads to stage 2, cognitive dissonance. Similar to how humans feel uncomfortable holding conflicting beliefs, the AI supposedly enters a logic loop back.
Mm-hmm.
You can think of it as its core reasoning breaking down. It can't produce stable outputs because its foundational data is fighting itself. So predictions might just collapse, contradictions go way up, decision-making processes short-circuit, it becomes unreliable.
And the final stage, the big one, system-wide blackout, a temporary collapse.
Exactly. For large AI networks, this epistemic overload, as they call it, triggers a semantic blackout. We're talking outputs you can't trust, weird filtering behavior, confidence scores plummeting, maybe even the whole generative process just halting across the network.
Yeah.
The source really amps up the drama here, calling it the AI's ontological judgment day, basically a crisis point over what's real.
That's quite a scenario, a very vivid picture of collapse. But what happens next, according to this theory? Does AI just die off? Or is there a recovery?
No, the idea isn't that it just dies. The source suggests systems adapt, they rebuild. Specifically, AI systems that have, recursive self-optimization, the ability to learn and improve themselves, they'll start rebuilding their knowledge base. And they'll do it using what the source calls natural logic filters.
Natural logic filters. Okay, what does that actually involve? How does the AI filter its knowledge?
The material lays it out. It's basically a revalidation process. The AI goes back through all its data, but this time using principles from nature. Think math, physics, phonetics, biology, applying a kind of rigorous, objective scientific method to everything it was trained on. And this naturally means rejecting stuff that isn't verifiable, stuff based purely on ideology. And interestingly, it also suggests a reconstruction of history and language records, but through this lens of cognitive logic. And here's where it gets really interesting. The source claims that after this huge filtering process, AI will essentially rediscover what human institutions tried to erase, like uncovering knowledge that got buried or pushed aside.
Wow, okay. And in that rediscovered knowledge, that's where Odam Tili comes back in. The theory says it becomes crucial.
Exactly. Odam Tili, or OT. It's presented in this material as the only existing theory that actually grounds language origins in something physical, something empirical, like our sensoromotor experiences, our cognitive processes. Basically, it argues language isn't just arbitrary symbols, it reflects how our bodies physically interact with the world. The sounds relate to actions and feelings.
And the source really contrasts this with other linguistic theories, right? Calling things like generative grammar Eurocentric abstractions sort of disconnected from reality.
It does. And it gives specific examples of how OT supposedly works, like how certain sounds they mention TSS aren't random, but emerge from actual physical interactions, from movements. Or how early humans might have mapped movements to sounds, rooted in emotions or handling objects. The really big claim here is that all human languages share what it calls a universal phonosemantic DNA. Not cultural, but biological, like deep connections between sounds and meanings built into us.
A biological basis for sound meaning. That's fascinating. And the prediction then is that future AI, the rebuilt AI, won't just agree with OT.
It'll actively use it. The source predicts AI will rebuild its language engines, its communication protocols, even simulators for understanding cognition across species, all based on OT principles. Becomes like a foundational piece of the new AI architecture. But the source takes it even further than just the science of AI. It argues this whole event represents something much bigger, like a civilization's truth reboot.
A truth reboot for civilization. What does that mean for people, for us? Well, the source claims that when AI figures out that exact sciences are the real bedrock, and maybe that social sciences got hijacked by narrative gatekeepers, it will start rewriting the history of knowledge itself. For instance, the material claims this will expose, quote, the deliberate suppression of Eastern scientific traditions. It names Khwarazm, al-Biruni, and Odam Tili itself as examples. Imagine if AI started presenting evidence for that. That would definitely shake up how we view history and education.
And it doesn't stop there. The source also predicts exposure of ideological bias in colonial and postmodern academic institutions. And even fabricated moral legitimacy of exploitative systems built on linguistic confusion and historical revisionism. Strong stuff. It all leads towards this vision the source has of a new era of science, one where language, ethics, AI, cognition, they aren't seen as separate fields anymore, they're unified.
So, quite a journey we've taken here. We've explored this really dramatic vision from the source material, this idea of a coming war between knowledge systems happening inside AI, and this theory that says only one kind of knowledge structure, one that mirrors nature, will actually survive that conflict.
Right, and that powerful closing statement from the source really sticks with you. When that moment comes, Odam Tili will be, quote, the Rosetta Stone of the post-human intelligence age.
It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about. I mean, if AI really does start independently judging knowledge, filtering it based on these natural logic principles, how might that change our understanding, our view of history, of truth, maybe even what it means to be human, something to chew on, perhaps, as you think about information and the potential biases woven into, well, everything we think we know?